Welcome to the That Don't Fit podcast, a podcast where we're dedicated to talking about life and life's real issues that cross racial and generational lines. My name is Jared Torrance, and I'm here with my co-host, Andy Farmer. We're friends, we're pastors, we're wanting to help people talk and process life in a crazy world. Welcome to the conversation.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
And we're talking about race, and we're talking about conversations on race. And the thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to revisit something from the last conversation. To set it up, it's a little challenging because we did these episodes about a month ago, and so this event happened a month ago, but I had to treat it like it just happened like a week ago because that's when this ran. So if you'll follow me, a month ago we had a conversation, and JT was sharing about some things how he reacts to people and how he deals with things in conversations. And I did something in that I didn't think about. And then 2 days later, I really woke up in the morning and I felt sort of a conviction in my heart that I had handled that poorly. And so I texted JT and I said, listen, here's what happened, and I'm sorry I did this, and I don't even know if you remembered it, but it certainly affected me. And I thought, rather than kind of try to pull it, I thought, let's leave it in there, and we'll use this time to kind of launch out and talk about it a little bit. So what you're getting is us interacting with something that happened in the last episode that really happened a while back. So we've dealt with it, but I wanted to go back and revisit it because it's very much a part of the conversation that we need to have on experience. So I'm going to have the tape run right now, the little clip of it, and then we'll jump back in.
Perfect. Yeah, I feel like most of the things I don't do consciously, but are just kind of a part of, is like trying to make people feel comfortable around me. As a 6 foot on a good day, 5'11" 3/4, however you want to say it, like 300.
We'll call you 6. We'll call you 6.
Yeah, we'll do
for this
6.
For this podcast. You are 6 foot.
As a 6 foot, 300 pound black man.
And you're 260.
Yes, I like that. 6 foot, 260. Let's run those numbers.
That's for the record.
It's just I'm aware that my presence causes fear.
Yeah.
It's part of the reason why I'm always laughing all the time, because laughter is disarming and laughter humanizes people. And
you mean I'm not that funny?
See, no, yeah, I'm just trying to humanize you. Oh no, I am a joyful guy, but that's good.
Well, keep it up because I like it.
But there's just certain things I do that I try to make me as approachable as possible, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
So what you saw happen there, or at least what you heard happen there, was JT, you mentioned that you'll use humor, given that you're a large black man, can be intimidating to people. You'll use humor to disarm.
Yes.
And in that clip, what I did there, in that conversation, what I did there is I made a joke. And we laughed about it a little bit and then moved on. And I realized, the thing I realized after the fact, that joke was motivated by a sense of being uncomfortable, a sense that I was something you were saying made me uncomfortable. So I used humor to back up and to create some distance, and that's what affected me, because it gets to something that's very important about experience. There's a lot of things that happen in conversations that we don't always notice. Yeah. And the thing that I've been thinking about a lot these days is the issue of empathy. So, and the failure of empathy there. So I want to talk about empathy today, but my experience was feeling like I really distanced myself from you in that moment. I found my safe space by pushing you back at a time where you were actually expressing a certain vulnerability. So I won't make too much of it, but I'd love to get your thoughts on that experience and whether you even noticed it at the time or in reflecting on it, your thoughts.
That's good. Yeah, I think so many things that happen in these conversations, I think, are so reactionary. So I don't even think I would be fully conscious of my reaction to your use of humor in that way to kind of back out of the situation. And so it's kind of like a uncomfortable reaction from you
Yeah.
elicits an uncomfortable response in me. And so I'm like, okay, I guess I'll just laugh too. But I did sincerely laugh at that. And so I think it's just kind of a back and forth, like, oh, that made him uncomfortable. Now I'm uncomfortable with his discomfort. How can we just kind of get past this? Is sort of the kind of hyper speed response that happens in moments like that. And I think it's really easy for us to not address it and just kind of go past it. But I think if we keep doing that, I don't think growth and empathy happens that way. So even you, when this happened in live time, when you kind of pulled me into the office the other day and addressed this with tears in your eyes, you know, that breaks down even more walls of barriers that I can have. It's just like, man, I can really be vulnerable with this person. I can really, if there's something that happens, this guy is going to come to me and address it. He's not just going to allow something like that to just be swept under the rug. And I, as a minority, I don't think, I guess people in general, I don't think we really get that often. I don't think we, I don't think we have the categories of, here's what I've done. That moment has passed. Let me go back in, dig into that, what happened, bring it up so we can address it. And I think that's what the Bible calls us to in walking with each other in love with brotherly affection, is to address hard things, no matter how minuscule or how small they are. I wasn't incredibly affected by that. I was affected by it in a little ways, but seeing how affected you were by your defense of that moved me in specific ways. So.
It's interesting, yeah, because I think there may have been a dozen of those, and you know, and we're so familiar with navigating them.
Yes. Yep.
We don't think about them. I mean, I think that was actually the Lord kind of saying, "Hey, sport, you know,
Yeah.
it's a way to kind of put me in my place, and which is where I belong." But I feel like that was a moment where the Lord sort of gave me an opportunity to reflect. I don't presume either you or I will always catch those.
Right.
Those are sort of micro adjustments we're making.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think humans do it. We do it cross genders, certainly cross cultures. We do it.
Yeah.
The point I got from it was the issue of it wasn't just a conversation. It was a moment where you were sharing something that kind of gets at who you are. And your experience and how you adapt to people and how you adapt to situations.
Yeah.
And it's a vulnerability in that sense, and my lack of awareness of that. My need to keep my own distance was the issue that I felt like the Lord was trying to put on my heart. And it gets to the idea of empathy, and what really helped me was I think of empathy, and I kind of had the big moments. Something really has gone wrong, and you're sitting with someone.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and those are important. But the small empathy moments, the engaging with you as a real person,
Yeah. That's good.
the making myself vulnerable because you're being vulnerable, walking in truth
Yeah.
and light,
Yeah.
is where I think there can be a lot of need to deal with in talking about race.
Yeah. The everyday empathy.
Yeah.
Is that's huge. It's not just the big tragic events where we sit down or like we have to set up a meeting and do these things. It's just like, no, these people are experiencing things every single day.
Yeah.
And growing in empathy doesn't mean growing in empathy means growing in empathy. It means doing more of it, of understanding all different kinds of people where they are on different days, and not trying to distance yourself from their experience, but trying to say, okay, how can I walk with this person and feel this with them in that way? I think that's really good. Everyday empathy rather than just the bigger events. That's great.
So how do we grow in that? How do we deal with that?
Empathy is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I think we need to grow in our ability to be uncomfortable. It's so much easier to, if someone's opening up and being vulnerable, to kind of just leave that in their space. For me to put on the clothes of someone else's suffering or hardship is emotionally exhausting. It's difficult and it's uncomfortable. But it's what Christ calls us to. And in a way, it's what ultimately, we have, Hebrews says we have a great high priest who sympathizes with us. He became weak for us. Like the Son of God became weak. Like he clothed himself in flesh. And he understood, he was tempted in every way, And so he is able to enter into that. And he's able to, he doesn't just scoff and just stand off and say, it's like, okay, like, I get that you're doing that. But it's like, no, he like enters into that suffering. And we're called to love as Christ loves us. And if I'm loving people like Christ loves me, it's going to elicit that I must become empathetic, uncomfortable, loving, and standing in there. Yes, it's emotionally exhausting, but my goodness, like when I pause, and I think that's another thing is that we don't pause. Being empathetic is not a quick thing to do.
Yeah,
you have to stop. You have to think. You have to consider. You have to create scenarios in your head that would liken the experience that the person is feeling, and you have to walk into that. And that's hard. Our fast-paced life does not leave a lot of room for pausing, empathizing, and just being. We're especially with younger guys, I mean, we're what people call the microwave generation. Everything is so quick and personalized to fit our needs. And so it's just the complete antithesis of what we are trained to function in.
Yeah. And usually the first thing out of our mouths is probably not the right thing.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the hard part. You mentioned you got to pause.
Yeah.
Uncomfortable moments like almost beg for us to fill the gap with words, or in my case with laughter. Laughter is a way to it's nonverbal use of language to create space, and we do that with words. So I think that's one of the things that I recognize is you've got to be able to kind of self-edit for another purpose. It reminds me a bit of gratefulness and expressing gratefulness or appreciation to somebody. It's not something that's natural.
Yeah.
It requires thought, and it doesn't need to be the big, I wrote you a long letter of all the 18 ways you've affected my life.
Yeah.
It can be a drop-in, it can be a text, it can be a lot of things, but it's that sense, those build bridges. I think in when we're with folks who are like us, whatever that is, our religious tribe, our racial tribe, whatever that is, all those bridges sort of exist. They're just there. They're a function of commonality. When we have to interact with people where the bridges aren't necessarily there, or maybe our life experience has been we've tried to build bridges and then they've been bombed.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily want to build that bridge again.
Yeah.
Or if that bridge is just hard to build, we're building in a tough place.
Yeah.
Those kind of things can really kind of it's the hard work of how do I make a bridge out of this situation.
Yes. Man, okay, you just said so many things that are so helpful. So we're talking about the everyday empathy and how that needs to be a regular part of our lives. And then as we're getting into, ethnic groups and people that are like us, if people are like us, it carves a way for easier empathy.
Yeah.
We want easy empathy. We don't want to have to do all that work. But it's like, man, if I have an overall shared experience with this person, and the more shared experiences we have, it's not going to take much work to empathize with that person. And so that's where our comfort wants to lead us to. It's just like, oh, it's easy for me to empathize with that brother over there because I know we've had such a similar experience. We want that easy, comfortable empathy. But like empathy in itself is not a comfortable, what is it, a virtue? What is it, act? I don't know how to describe it.
Let's call it a virtue.
Virtue, yeah. Right now, empathy is a virtue. And so we want that easy, everyday, easy empathy. And if we're crossing cultural lines, ethnic lines, if we're crossing generational lines, there's going to be discomfort in that, and it's going to make empathy harder. And then as we're crossing those lines, and if those we try to build a bridge and it gets blown up, what we do then is we start self-protecting. Because there's a mutual vulnerability that happens. Like if someone is sharing their suffering or sharing their experience with me, that's a vulnerability. And then if I'm stepping into that, I'm like, oh man, I hope I don't mess this up. There's a vulnerability there. And so there's a two-way vulnerable empathy engagement that is not easy, that we want it to be easy, that if it goes wrong, we're both going to put up protective barriers to protect ourselves.
Yeah, that's good. And it's experienced last night that he's coming to mind as we're talking. We were in a conversation with some folks, and we were talking about cultural appropriation. The idea that I can reach into someone else's culture and I can take what I like from it and use it for my own sense of self without regard to the value it has in another person's culture. And I was just sharing, it's hard for me because I want to, with a lot of different cultures, I want to appreciate and enjoy and imbibe and grow through those experiences. But I was saying how hard it is because I don't know the lines. I don't know when I've done that. When I've basically taken and said, hey, great, thank you, man. Yeah. And I'll use this for my purposes. Appreciate it. It's mine now.
Yeah.
And then my friend Guy, who was sitting next to me, he was really helpful. And he basically said, yeah, when someone in a majority culture, I'm not quoting him, but this is very helpful. When someone's in a majority culture and you're in a minority culture and you're used to people disdaining your culture, and then they come and they express something they like about it, or they want to do something with it, it's awkward. It's threatening. He said, I don't know if that's exactly what he used, but it was the idea is that I don't know how to relate to that. I don't trust that. And so what he did there was very empathetic to me, though, because what he did is he said, I can identify from your perspective about the awkwardness.
Yeah.
You're struggling with how do I know I'm being authentic, being honest about how I'm relating to your culture. Well, this can help you understand the reactions you might get when you talk about things. Yeah. And he was just being honest, but I think it was very empathetic honesty. It was, I'm trying to enter into your perspective so that we can actually grow together in this. And, at the heart of empathy, I think, is that sense of I want to enter into something relationally. It's almost, we need it, I think, in a sense, in order to get to understanding.
Yeah.
Sitting down and debating a topic can result in a lot of perhaps clarity. Certainly, clarifying positions.
Yeah.
But what would happen if we started with empathy? What would we started with? Let me understand your perspective. Let me hear from you, and try to identify before I begin to talk about where I agree or disagree.
And you know what that protects conversations from. I think you said, I guess this would be last week's episode. You said, I think it was last week's episode. You said something about conversations not being dialogues or conversations. It's mostly just like I monologue, then you monologue, then I monologue, then you monologue. We're all just like trying to just make our cases. Yeah. And when we're starting, if we start with empathy, we start from a place where we are trying to understand the other person. That transforms the whole conversation. I think Jared Mellinger said this, quoting Tim Shorey, I think, of just goals of conversations need to be like, I'm going to make you feel like the most understood person once you leave. Like once you leave this conversation with me, you're going to be like, I am so understood right now. Like if that's the goal of our conversations, it changes things, and it's so helpful. Like, what's that dude's name? VeggieTales creator guy, Phil something.
Don't ask me.
Phil, yeah, something. Well,
All I know is tomatoes.
Well, it was interesting a couple months ago, when all of the kind of racial tensions exploded in a new way. This year, he released a video called "Race in America." He had part one, and then he did another one, part two. And of course, people are going to debate blah blah blah, like sources and things like that. But it was really helpful, very clear, and it's about 20 minutes long. He just goes on this long talk about tracing systemic injustices in America and how it affects things today. And the thing that got me, I wasn't anticipating this at all. And that's the thing, is empathy can be surprising.
Yeah.
And he looks at the camera after his 20-minute dialogue and he goes, now what do I want you to do with all of this? He said, what do I do now? And he looks at the camera and he just goes, I want you to care. And then it just goes to a black screen. And then I'm just sitting there at my laptop and I just start like weeping, because that's not even where I think people can go, because you get all these facts and all this information and people can think of it as like, oh, I got ammunition for my next debate. And he's like, no, like, I just want you to care about this.
Yeah.
And that affected me so much, of just like, wow, like when people care, it matters so much.
Yeah.
But yes, I was just, and that's what we've been talking about now is empathy and stepping into people's shoes and compassion. And that's missing from a lot of conversations surrounding ethnic tensions and things like that.
And you said it right. I think it's when there's a lack of empathy and respect. And another way of looking at it is it's respect. It's demonstrating honor and respect. If you're trying to line it up biblically, there's a sense of respect fueled by love. Love as God defines love, which is love God, love others. Yeah. My posture is loving, and I respect because I want to be humble. And loving humility is where I think empathy comes from. Yeah. The absence of that, I think, communicates I don't really care. Yeah. I appreciate it. Appreciate your thoughts. Don't really care. Yeah. Kind of wrapped up in my own little world. Thank you very much.
Right.
Can you let me talk now?
Yes. Waiting for my turn to speak.
Waiting for my turn to speak. And in racial conversations, I think in particular, that sense of, okay, I folks like me, white folks who want to develop this approach to be able to have conversations, there's an interesting tendency to say, I have nothing to say. I just need to listen. In fact, there are people out there who basically say, it's time for you to shut up. It's time for us to talk. That doesn't create conversation. Right. That's just the other people getting an opportunity to yell.
Yes.
And so that's not the goal. Right. The goal of conversation, we're talking about conversation. We're not talking about idea exchange.
Right, yeah.
Idea exchange can happen. What we're talking about is, for folks like me, you have something to say. Yeah. You have something to contribute to the conversation. But there's no need for you to drive the conversation. It's okay for you to let the other person's perspective shape the way you talk about things. You don't even have to agree with everything, but you can learn. And empathy allows you to walk into something with no agenda for what you're trying to get the other person to understand about you. Yeah. It's the absence of that agenda. It's a servanthood agenda. I want to serve other people that I'm talking to by the way I posture myself. And going back to our interchange, it was not servanthood. It was me serving myself. This works for me. And so, as we're talking, and we'll have those moments, I'm sure, through, when we do this, because we both have thoughts.
Yes.
I just want to make sure that we keep in mind, and this is where we'll kind of wrap up.
Yep. Good.
Let's enter into conversations with the goal of, let me walk in empathetically. Let me walk in respecting the other person, dignifying their experience, not evaluating and not critiquing it, and not baptizing our own as what needs to drive the conversation.
That's good.
And let's love each other.
Yeah, it's like Philippians 2, where it says, count others more significant than yourselves.
Yeah.
If we're both entering into things thinking the other person is very significant, we're just gonna outdo one another in showing honor.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's in the Bible.
Yeah, that is all these things are in the Bible. Which brings us to, why theology matters in this. And if you remember, like in Philippians, Paul's motivation for that was explicitly tied to the work of Christ.
Yeah.
Have this mindset amongst yourselves that was yours in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
Though he was in the form of man. Oh, sorry. Though he was God. He did not count that. I'm going to botch this first because I'm getting all jacked up about it because it's so good. Hold on, let me think here, because it really is. It all ties to the work of Christ.
Yeah.
He did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but rather emptied himself, clothing himself in flesh, and humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross. So like that's the gospel. Jesus counting others more significant than themselves, Son of God, clothing himself in flesh, becoming the sacrifice for our sins to atone for all the wrongs that we have done. That is the ultimate form of counting others more significant than yourselves. And because of that, we can have eternal life and joy and peace and eternal security and union with Christ and all these things because of what Jesus Christ accomplished on the cross for us. And then Paul says, have that mind amongst yourselves. So it's again, loving others in the same way that Christ has loved us. Look at Christ's life. Look at what he did. Look at the entirety of the incarnation. That is an ultimate act of love in itself. And then going through all the way to the point of obedience, death on a cross for us, so we can be brought into the family of God. And we're supposed to love each other that way.
That's good. Let's end there, man.
Yeah, it's great.
Great. Excellent.